Hello folks, welcome back to another video. It's been a little while since I've done one of these, so forgive me if I'm a little bit out of practice. I took a little bit of a break. I haven't really been painting too much. I've painted a few little things off camera that were kind of smallish little pieces that I didn't think would make particularly good videos. Maybe in the future I might do a little bit of a recap on those little things, but I think primarily people want to sort of see me paint up these 3D printed statues. I think that's what people sort of get the most benefit from. So I am back to do another one of those, and we're going to start with Michelangelo from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, if you've seen previous videos of mine, I have already made Raphael and Rocksteady and Bebop, and they are all from LA figures, and I have printed them all in 1/8 scale, with Michelangelo being no exception. So he was pretty straightforward to print. A little bit of cleanup, nothing too major. LA figure models always go together really nicely, so you never really have to worry too much about gap filling or anything like that, which is good because it means you can sort of put it together like this and then break it down for assembly, ready to paint. He is pretty much printed hollow throughout, so he is nice and light. And obviously he has been all cleaned up, sanded, all that kind of thing, making sure any sort of voxel lines taken care of. And I have sprayed him, so he's in a grey primer for the figure, and for the base I have just sprayed it completely black. So I'll just give you a very brief sort of 360, so you can just sort of see the model as it comes before I come along and cover it over with paint. Okay, so as I say, most things will come off, it all's going to break down quite easily, so I'm going to take the guy apart and let's get cracking with the painting. Okay, so with the piece disassembled, the first thing I'm going to do is tackle an awkward area to get to, which is the inside of the mouth, and for that I'm going to use some Screamer Pink. Now then, for the skin, I want him to have quite a nice lime green colour, so I'm going to start with some Goblin Green, which as I say is a nice sort of shade to start with. I'm just going to throw this all over the skin. Now I'm going to come in and probably do 2 thin coats of this because I'm going to come in later with some dry brushing, so I want to make sure that I've got a base colour down that's going to stand up to that. And after 2 thin coats, this is what I'm left with. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is a dry brush using some Moot Green. So in order to do a dry brush, you simply get a bit of the paint on the brush, take off as much as you possibly can, test it on your thumb so you're not leaving too much behind, and then just start to apply it all over the skin. Now this model is pretty good because it's got a lot of texture designed into it, so it really does start to pick up the dry brushing. Okay, so after that first dry brush, this is what I'm left with. Now what I'm going to do is a second dry brush. Now by adding a little bit of yellow into that green mix that I had before, it actually brightens it up. So yellow is a natural highlight to green. So what I'm going to do now is a second dry brush, but this time I'm just going to be a bit more selective with this, concentrating more on the areas that was more prominent. So basically anything that's sort of facing upwards really. Now, next up, I am breaking out the soft pastel set. These are cheap pastels you can get from any type of hobby store. And what I'm going to do is get a sort of a ratty old brush, and I'm going to put some of the black pastel on. And I'm going to use this to work in the shadows all in between each of the muscles. So this is a nice little hack if you don't have an airbrush, or if you just want to sort of have a slight bit more control. Basically a model like this is perfect because all the muscles are so well defined on the figure that this is really kind of like paint by numbers. As you just sort of carry on through, you can start to see this nice shadow has now been applied. Next up I'm going to work on the shell, so for that I'm going to take some Steel Legion drab and just do a couple of base coats all over the shell at the back here, And then I'm going to do it across the sort of middle part here, and then also underneath as well here. Next up, I'm going to take some Agrax Earthshade, which is a nice brown wash from Citadel, and I'm going to cover the entire shell with this. Just trying to really make sure that it works into all the nooks and crannies. With that wash all dried, I'm now going to follow that up with a dry brush using some Sandry dust. Now for the front of the shell, I'm going to start off with a base layer of leather brown. That is then followed up with an all-over wash using some Seraphim Sepia. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do is tidy this back up, and I'm going to do that with two dry brushes. The first going back in with that leather brown, and then a second dry brush using Baylor brown, which is a slightly brighter brown. Now finally, just to finish off the front of the shell, I'm just going to use a little bit of Agrax Earthshade. I'm just going to work this into some of the scars and dents, and also just sort of around the outline. Okay, you're going to start working on the face next. Now I'm going to do the bandana, and obviously it's going to be orange. Now for this, I'm actually going to use this Game Effects Rust colour by Vallejo. Technically, this is supposed to be a sort of technical paint and effects paint, if you like, but it's a handy orange because it's quite thick. There's a lot of pigment to it. That being said, this is still going to take at least 2 coats, possibly 3, because orange, as we all know, is a horrible colour to paint. Next up, I'm going to throw over some Cassandora yellow, just to give a little bit more depth to the mask. Next up is a little bit of black into each eye. Then it's a little bit of bone white across the teeth. Next up, I'm just taking a little bit of Nuln Oil and I'm just running that into the recess in between each of the teeth. And then finally, just to finish off the face, is some pure brilliant white into the centre of each eye. Now the idea here is I laid down a coverage of black first, so when I put the white on, I just want to leave a slight little bit of black around the outline. Like so. Okay, so with the face finished, the last thing to do on the body now is the belt, and for that I'm going to use some Rhinox hide. I'm going to use the same colour on the knee pads and the elbow pads as well. That is then followed up with a dry brush using some Mornfang brown. And then just to finish off the belt is a little bit of silver over each of these buckles and these little fasteners. And for the wraps across the wrists, I'm just using a base coat of some deck tan. And then that is followed with a black wash. Now to complete the skin textures, I'm going to do the toenails and fingernails of each hand. So I'm going to use some Ogre Camo, which is quite a thin paint, which will sell the effect better, because we don't want it to be slightly translucent. And all I'm going to do is lots of thin strokes across the entire nail. It just doesn't matter if they're completely the same width apart. Bit of variety is fine, as is the thickness of the actual lines you're painting. But basically what we're trying to do is lots of quick succession lines and not cover the entire thing just in one flat colour. All you got to do is just make sure that the lines all go in the same direction. So you might want to need a couple of passes, because as I say, this is quite a translucent paint. But effectively that's kind of the effect you're going for. Here's a more complete version. So yeah, it just sort of looks slightly more sort of natural with those lines and a bit of the colour underneath showing through. It is onto the nunchucks next, and for this I'm going to start off with some Mornfang brown, which is a nice sort of medium colour brown. That is then followed up with an all-over wash using some Agrax Earthshade. That is followed up with a dry brush using some Leather Brown. Next up is Gunmetal Silver. Then it's some Null Oil all over those silver parts. Okay, so it's time to turn to the base now. First thing I'm going to do is the soil layer. So for that I'm going to use my trusty Rhinox hide. Next up I'm going to do all the concrete, and for that I'm going to use some Somber Grey by Vallejo. And then the last of the base colours to be applied is a little bit of deck tan for the road markings. Now with those base colours down, the next thing I'm going to do is throw a bunch of washes over it. So what that's going to do is obviously make it look more realistic. It's going to dirty it up, it's going to get into all the nooks and crannies, and it's just going to make it look 10 times better. So the way to do this is basically chaos. There's absolutely no rhyme or reason to what I'm going to do. I'm going to take greens, I'm going to take oranges, I'm going to take sepia colours, blacks, browns, you name it. And I'm just going to basically go one by one and just start slapping it over. Because if you think about sort of concrete and ground in general, pavements, all that sort of stuff, rocks, it's a mixture of colours. It's, you know, there is no one sort of colour on it. So that's what we're going to do, and I'm not even going to clean the brush out in between. Don't do what I do. And so here I go, just going to carry on doing this and basically just make sure that everything by the end of it is completely covered. Okay, so all those washes are nice and dried. You can see it's made quite a difference to the overall colour. Lots of different colours and blends on there. Obviously it's looking a little bit messy, so we're going to tidy all this up. So to do that, we're going to do some more dry brushing. First of all, I'm going to dry brush across all of the mud soil side with some Steel Legion Drab. And then for all of the concrete, I'm going to do a dry brush of this Administratum Grey. And after all that dry brushing, this is the final result. Next up is the fire hydrant, and I'm going to be using some Mephiston Red, and this is going to be an all over base coat for this first step. With a little touch of black and a lot of water, I've now just made up a black wash. Now of course you could use something like Nuln Oil, but I just want to sort of save a little bit of money because it's quite a big piece to cover. So I'm just going to cover the entire thing and make sure that the wash gets into all the nooks and crannies and basically just sort of gives a little bit of dirt to the whole thing. Now taking a little bit of silver, what I'm going to do is just work in a little bit of wear and tear. So there's a few sort of scratches and dents that are sculpted into the piece already, so I can just layer that in there. And then what I'm going to do is just go around, do a little bit of edge highlighting just around kind of the parts where you'd expect a little bit of wear and tear, around the edges, sort of on the rivets, that type of thing. And then finally, just to add a little bit more interest, I'm going to do a very light dry brush using some of this rust effect, but basically any orange will do. I'm just going to be a little bit selective for where I put this. And that is a wrap on this particular model. I'm really quite pleased with how this one came out, and I will enjoy adding him to the rest of the collection. So I've got 2 of the turtles down, 2 more to go, and a couple of other sort of ancillary characters to complete out the line. So stick with me if you want to see how those turn out in the future. As always, I'll end the video with him added into the collection so you can see all the ones that I've made so far. But before that, I just want to say thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.